All right. Well, the EFF has announced drastic leadership changes at their media briefing earlier today. And SABC News' senior political reporter Samkele Maseko was there and joins me in studio now to further unpack what transpired at that particular briefing. So, Samkele, great having you with us in studio. Good afternoon. So, quite a lot of revelations and developments pertaining to, of course, the EFF party. Tell us what transpired there.
Indeed, the political tectonic plates are shifting beneath the soil at Winnie Madikizela Mandela House. EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu yesterday evening resigning from the party at about 7 o'clock in the evening, sending that letter to Secretary General Marshall Dlamini, and leader of the party Julius Malema was out in Sishiko. We had to drive back to engage with Mr. Shivambu here in Johannesburg at his residence on his resignation. Julius Malema did not see this particular resignation coming, despite it being rumored for the past 3 weeks that there would be mass resignations from the EFF that would cross over to the MK party. Hence, you've seen Mzwanele Manyi, who's left the EFF and gone to the MK party. He will ultimately be sworn in as a member of parliament next week. And that will particularly tell you that the tectonic plates are shifting in the economic freedom fighters. Julius Malema saying this is not the end of the EFF. People must not see this as the demise of the July 26 movement. They will rise from the ashes and they will bounce back stronger and better. And saying, Floyd Shivambu, you are my brother. If you ever want to come back, the EFF constitution does not permit, but for you, I'll do anything. I'll open the door.
You know, very interesting, Samkele, that you mentioned there's been rumors for 3 weeks. But even preceding that, there has been rumors around, of course, the possible issues pertaining to leadership squabbles or disagreements, to put it in a better term, within the EFF party. And there were rumors that they were just showing a united front, of course, going into the elections. But let's talk about the choice of Floyd Shivambu, of course, moving over to the MK party. I mean, surely that has set tongues wagging.
It has sent tongues wagging, but for me, the most interesting part was it started with Makasela Mzobe. When Mzobe first announced he was joining the EFF, he joined the EFF because of his close proximity with Floyd Shivambu. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi was recruited into the politics of South Africa and the politics of the Mass Democratic Movement, the MDM structures, the PYA, by Floyd Shivambu at Wits University. He was ultimately taken to the EFF by Floyd Shivambu in that particular appearance at the Kopi in Marikana when Ndlozi was wearing a black beret. And ultimately, they have a stronger relationship in the EFF than Mbuyiseni and Julius. And that will tell you of what Julius then says. There will be others who are loyal to Floyd Shivambu who will live with him. You look at Popi Molailela, the Deputy Secretary General of the EFF. She came from political obscurity and rose to the top echelons of the EFF on the recommendation of Floyd Shivambu, the EFF Deputy President. Much is also rumored about Veronica Mente, the national chairperson, that she is also out. So there are 6 people who are confirmed that they are leaving the EFF and going to the MK party. 2 have been confirmed at this point in time, Floyd Shivambu and Mzwanele Manyi.
Very interesting indeed. So at this stage, how will the new leadership structures actually look like from now on? Do you have any inside information as to also who replaces Floyd Shivambu in Parliament?
There's no, looking at the EFF list, it will obviously go on the chronological way that they've structured the next on the list, dependent on whether they are still a member of the EFF or not. If not, the next person will be followed suit until the EFF has... the Parliament has opened up another window, or the IEC has opened up another window for political parties to replenish their lists to the National Assembly, to the National Council of Provinces, and to the NCOP, and that will ultimately be at a later stage in the year, not at this point in time. And we will know at a later stage who will be replacing Floyd, not at this point in time. But what is rather interesting on this particular issue is the choice of party. You look at the close relationship Makasela Mzobe and Floyd Shivambu enjoy. The question is, how instrumental was Makasela Mzobe in getting Floyd Shivambu to join the EFF, as when Floyd Shivambu got Makasela Mzobe to join the EFF. But Floyd has been very unhappy in the EFF for quite some time now. I remember a discussion that took place at Nandoni Dam between Kume Ramulifo, who was in the DA, who left to join Rise Mzansi, and Ronald Ozilamula and Floyd Shivambu. They were speaking essentially about how blind loyalty does not reap rewards. There must be a reciprocal relationship and you can't just blindly follow someone and be tossed around like a toy when you are adding value to whatever relationship you have with that particular person. So it's been a very frictious relationship. For instance, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, I like cryptic messages that politicians send. I want just to go to this retweet of Mbuyiseni Ndlozi that he did yesterday evening. And that retweet was basically saying, it's a few words that are relevant. It is better, quote, it is better to sacrifice everything than to live in slavery, exclamation mark, end of quote. So that just tells you of the tension that is there politically in the economic freedom fighters.
You know, Samgele, I actually saw a tweet. I was speaking of tweets because I saw Josie Butane there, who has just newly rejoined the EFF, also stating, of course, the ANC, saying that, of course, you spoke about following blindly. He said, basically, Floyd followed Julius Malema, and Julius Malema basically left him to his own devices and never ensured of his political, of course, ascendancy, and made sure that he was just basically his political lackey.
No, but that is, to come to Julius Malema's defense, particularly knowing Julius Malema on this particular issue, it may be unfair to say that Julius Malema never assisted in Floyd Shivambu's political ascendance, because if you look at the historical context of it, Floyd Shivambu was a mere spokesperson of the ANC Youth League when they were elected in 2011, Galaga Estate. When they were expelled from the ANC, Floyd was no longer a member of the ANC, hence the ANC could not discipline him because his membership had expired, just like his membership has expired now in the EFF. So he ultimately went with Floyd to the EFF. From the EFF, Floyd became the deputy president of the EFF. The question then becomes, if you and I form a political party, I am the president, you are the deputy president, I'm Samkelo Masego, I'm 32 years old. I've got a long time in South African politics. I can't retire at 44. So it would mean I will have 5 or 6 consecutive terms as the leader of the party.
True.
But you and I are the same age. We are aging. You are not going to be reciprocal to the youth that is upcoming. They won't know you because you are aging. Our politics may not be relevant to them. And that will ultimately mean you may never get to the left wing of the union buildings. I may get there. You may not get there. You may end up being a deputy president if we win outright. If we don't win outright, you may ultimately not get the presidency of the country. That is where Floyd Shivambu is ultimately at. They missed a golden opportunity that I've been told by sources, by Floyd, that he says the EFF missed a golden opportunity to be part of the administration in the formulation of the government of national unity. And it is Julius Malema who persuaded other leaders of the party to say, no, let us not go with what Veronica meant, the national chairperson, and Floyd Shivambu in what they are pushing for us to join the GNU, which may ultimately be encompassing some of the many myriad of reasons why he ultimately left. But last week, there was a meeting of all the provincial chairs. They discussed the upcoming conference, and they were only keeping 4 of the 6 current officials. Floyd as DP, Julius as President, Marshall as Secretary General, keeping Ompile as Treasurer General. They were going to rotate the National Chair and the DSG, remove them and put in new faces. So that ultimately tells you that what Julius Malema warned Floyd Shivambu off at the 10th anniversary gala dinner in Kempton Park, that if he makes political maneuvers behind his back, he will not appreciate that. He will bury him to political obscurity. But if they come to him and speak to him nicely, he will sail and drive off into the sunset. So it just tells you that the political machinations towards the 3rd NPA had ultimately begun, which goes back to what Julius said in Kimberley, that we must be very vigilant. The enemy is out to divide us. We must not fall into that trap. They've fallen into it.
So I'm going to hold that thought because we do have political analyst Lukhona Mnguni joining us also just to give us some of his sentiments around these developments. Lukhona, a very good afternoon to you. Great having you with us. So you saw the media briefing. You've just heard from our senior political reporter. So we'd like to know, what are your sentiments on these developments?
No, very good afternoon to you and to your viewers. It's what I call a curious political moment, because there's so much about it that is unknown and very little that is known. So what has been put in the public domain is what the political actors want us to be busy dissecting. I'm more curious about what they are not telling us about this moment. I've never seen anybody resign from a political party in the presence of an entire political leadership with the political colors of the party that he's resigning from. And there's a lot of song and dance and, misery and all kinds of performative politics that follow that. And I think it's an important thing to actually look at in terms of what does this moment mean, not for Floyd Shivambu, but for the EFF. And I think that much is still to unfold, and I'm very much looking forward, as Samkele is saying, about the third National People's Assembly that takes place in December. What kind of resolutions will be taken in that People's Assembly? This may well just be a signaling of many more things to come in the EFF universe, and of course in the consolidation of political forces. There's no doubt that the EFF has made its calculations in terms of its growth trajectory in the previous elections of the 29th of May, and it has seen that it is now a party in decline. And parties in decline in South Africa tend not to be parties in, who then turn their fortunes around and then increase their political bases. And therefore, I think the EFF is at loggerheads about its own future. How does it position itself? Where does it see its future? And how does it, donate some of its infrastructure? I mean, Floyd Shivambu, of course, is not just an individual. As Julius Malema said in the press briefing, those loyal to him might well move, but we must also think about the backroom office of the EFF that Floyd Shivambu had built around him, an intellectual backroom. And could this be a donation of an intellectual capital to MK to make sure that MK actually does exist and thrive and is sustainable as a political party, rather than as what people may have thought of the party as one that will just collapse or one that will die at the fortunes or misfortunes of former President Jacob Zuma. So I think there's an interesting and, like I say, a curious political moment. There are a number of variables that we need to gauge as the developments unfold.
Samkele, is there a grander scheme of things? Is there a bigger picture happening behind the scenes, as Lukhona has stated, that we are not being made privy to? Is there a kind of a bigger game behind all these moves?
There is definitely a bigger game, as Lukhona is alluding to, because the MK party has concluded its mass mobilization. It's very good at mass mobilization, using the figurehead of Mhlanganyelwa, former President Jacob Zuma. But they've not been seen as an intellectually in-depth organization. They've been seen as a bunch of howlers whom will not be able to push the idea of an effective official opposition within the country. I will want to equate Floyd Shivambu to a Joel Nachitenze of the ANC. Joel Nachitenze is the brains trust of the African National Congress at some point in time. He was there, spearheading the strategy and tactics of the ANC. You compare that to a Floyd Shivambu, who was there on an intellectual basis and a strategy and tactics of the economic freedom fighters, particularly in the crafting and sharpening of the 7 cardinal pillars that ultimately your land expropriation, nationalization of the strategic sectors of the economy, and land expropriation without compensation. So a Floyd Shivambu that leaves the EFF comes with a backdrop of a number of highly important, the intellectual nub of the economic freedom fighters. You look at an individual like Snawo Tambo, who was the former spokesperson of the EFF, out in political obscurity, nowhere to be seen, not in the National Assembly. Where does he sit in the grander scheme of things? You look at him, Hussein Luzi, who may have felt over the years that he's continuously being given positions that set him up for failure, like his current deployment in a province like KwaZulu-Natal, where Floyd Shivambu failed, by the way. So the recruitment of Floyd into the EFF is about increasing the intellectual base of the MK party. It is about assisting Dr. Mandla Sehlophe in executing his mandate as the deputy president of the EFF and as the leader, official leader of the opposition within the country. But then it comes about the leadership structure of the EFF. It can't only be perceived as a Zulu nationalist leadership that is currently there. You need to infuse and broaden the base of the EFF. Floyd Shivambu is not a mobilizer. We must be frank about that.
Yeah.
He's not. He's an intellectual. But there's a vacancy in the MK party. There is no deputy secretary general. Makasela Mzobe could have easily been the secretary general of the EFF after the second firing of Arthur Zwane. But Makasela chose not to because he is more of a business person than an active politician in this current political conjuncture that this country is in. So a Floyd Shivambu comes into the mix as an intellectual base, but with an opportunity of also forming part of a formidable intellectual and ideological force in the top echelons of the MK party to assist Dr. Mandla Sehlophe. So on a public outlook, intellectual outlook, this is a big fish that the MK party has caught in this point in time. But on mass mobilization, he will not assist them at all.
Thank you for that point, Samkele, because that's exactly what I want to ask Lukhona there. Lukhona, look, we will be, of course, talking to the MK during the course of this bulletin to also get their side of the story as well. But, I mean, what does Floyd bring? Talking about that big fish that Samkele is referring to, what does he bring to the MK party? And what does he get that he obviously was not receiving at his now former home, which is the EFF? Also taking into account, of course, the current internal party dynamics within the MK party itself.
Well, look, I mean, I don't want to be too fixated about what he was getting and that which he will get at this point in time, because I mean, this is what 2.5 hours fresh news in terms of confirmation. I know Samkele started breaking the news much earlier, around mid-morning. Yes. But the reality of it is that Floyd brings intellectual depth to the MK party. He brings a sense of strategy. And I think that, you know, the leadership style of MK party with its, you know, strong arming sort of politics, he brings also that. In actual fact, I mean, if you talk to a number of people within the EFF universe, they find Floyd Shivambu to be much more strong arming than Julius Malema. And I think to an extent, he probably felt that, you know, if you remember the press briefing that the EFF held at the Results Operations Center during the period in the build-up to the announcement of the results of the election, where Malema, you know, stated that you will not see us stomping on stages and disrupting parliament and so on. So the EFF is becoming much more moderate, and it may well be that Floyd Shivambu is not well versed with those kind of politics, and he may well have been the agitator and the force behind the much more aggressive, radical politics of the EFF. And as the EFF becomes much more moderate, it must think carefully about where the MK party is positioned. And I know a number of people a few weeks ago have disagreed with me on this issue, but I did state that MK party is an existentialist threat to the EFF. And I think this is the moment of reckoning of that existentialist threat, that there is no way that the EFF thrives while MK is around and is sustainable. And if MK institutionalizes, which is what I think they are trying to do now, and in actual fact, never mind their tastes for, cavalier lifestyles and maybe their flirtation with corruption and all of that. But the MK party is actually assembling a serious grouping of strategists in the likes of Floyd Shivambu, in the likes of Lucky Montana, in the likes of Tom Moyane, Brian Molife, and all of that. The fact that those people, and I mean, just former Judge President John Klope, the fact that all of those people are now in the room and could contend about the future of MK party should actually worry a number of political players who are threatened in terms of their political basis by the existence of MK party. And if those individuals are allowed the space and room to craft a strategy and a future for MK party that is not only centered around former President Jacob Zuma, then MK party becomes a very serious, viable contender for the much more radical basis of our politics, and also becomes a contender for the much more vulnerable sectors of our society that are disillusioned with politics because of their socio-economic conditions and their lived experiences.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to talk further about the implications then that Floyd's departure will have on the EFF itself. But unfortunately, Samgele, I know we will be, of course, continuing to have more of these discussions. As Lukhanyo said there, it's just been 2 hours of this news that we've just received. Lukhona Mgodide, political analyst, alongside SABC News senior political reporter here in studio with me, Samgele Maseko. And of course, the resignation of Floyd Shivambu from the EFF to join the newly formed MK Party.